So this morning, let's talk a little bit about creating a context for learning, okay? When you are involved in the academic task with your children, sometimes the temptation is to get serious, to make learning real, to ask your kids to rise to the occasion, to be disciplined and diligent and dutiful. You know, have you ever had that experience? And the reason I think that we become sort of sober around specific learning moments is twofold. The first is we do tend to associate learning with pain. There is something about struggle that to us indicates that a child is working hard. We see ease as meaning they've already achieved and we shouldn't do any more of it. We see struggle as a sign that the child is engaged and learning. So we get serious because we're preparing for struggle. The second reason that we get all dutiful and diligent and disciplined is because our memory of school is a little bit that way. We think of it as different than life. Learning is a part of this hardworking, self-motivated, create important outcomes kind of experience. If you remember, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember when I graduated from college with my bachelor's, I didn't want to read a book for like a year. I remember trying to read a book, a novel. It was Absalom, Absalom by Faulkner, which was the hardest thing in the world to read. I was only doing it because I was in love. And the person I was in love with was getting his master's in Faulkner. And I thought, well, I'll show him that I love him by reading this horrible book. And I didn't even make it 2/3 of the way through. I mean, it was over my head. And all I felt the whole time was, this is really hard. And it reminds me of working too hard, which is what reminds me of school. So I don't want to do it. And I literally had to recover from the feeling of requirement around learning. Do any of you remember that feeling? And when we moved to Morocco, I was 23, and there was no television, of course. The internet didn't exist yet. So I didn't have a lot of options for entertainment. And my husband at the time, being a literature geek, you know, master's degree in literature, he had shipped a library's worth of books to our little apartment in Morocco, and I'm so glad he did. I started reading. I started by reading aloud to him. Isn't that funny? That's where we started. We started with like the Shogun series by James Clavell, the Asia series. And we read all of the books by MMK, like Shadow of the Moon and The Far Pavilions and all of her mystery novels. And then I started reading to myself again. And I read hard books like Anna Karenina and A Prayer for Owen Meany and others, you know, Black Like Me and The Invisible Man. I was suddenly interested in literature because it was completely on my own terms and it was for pleasure. I was getting a lot out of it. It was my escape from Arabic. It was my opportunity to go into a fantasy world and just relax there for a little bit, even if that world was challenging or upsetting or cliffhanging. It gave me an opportunity to experience learning without pressure, without requirement. And here's the crazy thing. Even though I read in college things like Great Expectations and A Tale of Two Cities and To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, I don't remember them as well as all the books I read in Morocco, the ones I picked off of a bookshelf provided to me. I mean, I didn't have a whole library. I just had John's library. And I just picked them based on, you know, what does the spine look like? What does the first paragraph feel like? No one told me what order to read them. I remember reading all these V.S. Naipaul books, which are fabulous, by the way. He's a historian who sort of blends creative nonfiction and historical writing. Very powerful writer. They're challenging. I find them more challenging now. I had a huge appetite for that in my 20s. There was this change in how I understood learning. It went from requirement, duty, diligence, discipline, testing, grading, following a syllabus, to me, perusing, tasting, wondering, trying, setting goals for myself. I remember in Anna Karenina, I wanted to really finish the book. It was long. It was translated from Russian. And so I would say to myself, okay, I'm going to read this many pages in a day. And then I would sort of check it off because I knew I wanted to finish the book. And I knew it was harder to read than, Shogun. But now it was under my sort of plan for myself, under my jurisdiction, not a teacher's. And part of what made that reading so poignant to me was that there was time to do it. It wasn't competing with other things. I wasn't also studying, for Psych 10 or Engineering 11. I was literally using time that was available to me living in a foreign country. So I would curl up in the corner and make myself a pot of tea and pull up a blanket and read, sometimes for hours. Now, that's a luxury none of you have right now. You all have small children. I know you're not just able to ditch them and go read War and Peace. But your kids, could they ditch a day of school to set a reading goal for themselves and just read what they were interested in? What if we had that same approach to math? We put math options out on a shelf. There were tangrams and origami, and there were measuring tools like liters and compasses and rulers of different kinds of measurement systems. And there was paper to play with that stuff. There were quilting squares and tools and fabric. And what if Yahtzee was on the shelf? And what if math books were on the shelf with certain pages turned down, or a feather as a bookmark? Just inviting someone to look at an image or look at a theorem. What if there was a book of Euclid's geometry on that shelf? What if we created space for some self-directed curiosity? That's what they do in the Montessori schools. They have all these little workstations and all these little bundles of manipulatives, and kids are sort of free to roam and allow their own curiosity to be piqued. Is that okay to do when we're educating our kids at home? Some kids would read all day to the exclusion of all else. For how many days? How many days would a kid read all day to the exclusion of all else? Wouldn't it be fun to find out? Couldn't we at home? What if a child read all day for a solid month? Gosh, how much learning would happen. Where would that lead? Oh, I know you're already thinking, but what about history, science, math, and grammar? I don't know. But after a month of reading, there might be some tangents from all that reading that drives you right into those things. Maybe there's some science and history and math already woven into what they're reading and you didn't even know it. It would be fascinating to find out. And literally, if we allowed for a little more exploration and curiosity arousal, maybe some of those lessons that we think require discipline would suddenly spring to an awakening for us. There would be some curiosity to fuel that fire instead of, oh yeah, I have to sit here and do this because my mom is saying it's time to do it. I think it's important to recognize that we do tend to see learning as hard, and we're suspicious of easy. So when we say things like, if we let our kids read, they do it to the exclusion of all else, we're admitting that reading sounds easy, therefore, maybe too much of it is a bad thing because it's not hard enough, it's not challenging enough, it's not inciting them in a direction of a school curriculum program. And yet, the things that are like a runaway train downhill, they are sweeping up so much learning into that wake. It's like, I don't know, you read War and Peace or Anna Karenina and you're in ancient whatever, ancient's too far back, but you're in Russian history. And suddenly you're like, well, where is Russia? Honestly, just going back to the podcast interview with Susan, when she brought up the fact that Prussia, spoiler alert, is the origin of our 12th grade system. Do you know what I immediately wondered? Prussia. When did Prussia stop being a country? And who's from Prussia? And then, literally, just a few nights ago, I was watching TV, I think we were on Netflix, and there's this new series about geniuses. And the very first genius that they examined was Karl Marx, who was from Prussia. And they just defined like his whole story, his education, his background, the role of Prussia in Europe at the time. And I found myself immediately again, why don't I remember more about Prussia from my history degree? I want to know about Prussia now. I am going to go find it out because 2 times within the last week, someone has reminded me that Prussia was a thing. And I don't really understand it well enough to know the rise, the fall, why it had such an undue influence on our educational system. That's what happens when you read, when you watch documentaries, when you stay alert to conversations, when you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. We watched the series called Genius that was on National Geographic about Albert Einstein. And literally there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about something that Einstein said or did in that series that informs how I understand learning and creativity. A man I thought I could never relate to because he is clearly from the sciences and I am clearly not. You know what we share in common? The imagination, the capacity to imagine what isn't into being, to see opportunities and new ways of knowing and understanding that weren't there before. I feel a kinship with flippin' Albert Einstein. How ridiculous is that? I'm nowhere near as smart as he is. And yet, now I think a little differently about the moon, the stars, the fabric of the universe. When they described the theory of relativity, you know what went through me? A thrill. Because I am the daughter of relativity. We all are. The whole postmodern moment we find ourselves in is this destabilizing one where we don't know how to evaluate viewpoint. We're trying so hard to find security in a multiplicity. And thanks to Einstein, we're still navigating that. And that's okay. It's okay. You can even attach to something if you want to. Just know that your attachment is your attachment because we cannot escape from globalism, from the science and technology world, from the diversity and complexity of the biosphere. We can't escape multiplicity now. It is with us forever. And our position in relation to everything else is constantly being reinformed and reinterpreted. That came through science. How cool is that? I don't know. I love all of that stuff. Nadine Dyer says the science of relations is for adults too. That's a Charlotte Mason concept. Yep. Morgan made a great comment. Everything is easy right now. It's almost scary. So one of the ways to think about ease is like learning to ride a bike. What's the point of learning to ride a bike? Is it the wobbling and the falling off? Or is it flying down the road with ease and not thinking about it? What's the point of learning to drive a car? Is it second guessing when to move the gear shift? Or figuring out how much brake to apply? Or when you can listen to the radio and drive without really thinking about driving? What's the point of learning to read? Is it struggling to sound out each word? Trying to know what the punctuation marks mean? Or able to give full attention to the ideas without being distracted by the type on the page? Ease equals mastery, and mastery is the goal. So when your child is ripping through a sheet of multiplication tables successfully, that's fun. You know what's not fun? Facing a page of multiplication tables when it's still a struggle. Now, we do have to struggle to get to the fun, but please don't short circuit the fun once we get there. Once you can do it easily, enjoy it for a little while before you add in new challenge. Don't go straight from learning to ride a two-wheeler to handing your child a unicycle, right? Enjoy riding the two-wheeler for a while. Bring in the unicycle when they feel comfortable and ready for a new challenge. That's the point. That's the point. Any questions about that? I think we've gotten it. I like seeing some of these people joining our little broadcast late. I just want to recap really quickly. Season 3 of the podcast launched today with Susan Wise-Bauer. Great interview. We're starting the 7-day writing blitz with our amazing writing blitz power packs starting next week. You can download the free guide for the 7-day blitz from the homepage of our website, bravewriter.com. And we invite you to participate next week on Instagram when I will be doing every single one of those projects all 7 days and sharing them on Instagram. And I hope that you will too. Use the hashtag BW7DayBlitz. I'm so glad that you are enjoying our podcast series. It is my absolute pleasure to provide it to you. The people I'm interviewing this season are exceptional people. Most of them are close friends. I decided to draw deeply on the wealth of homeschoolers that are a part of my life currently. And then we've also included some of the Brave Schooler wonderful women that you've all come to know over the years and hope you get to know better. I am going to let you connect with your kids now, go for ease, create a context that provides that opportunity for curiosity to be provoked. Trust the process. Don't become so dutiful all the time. If a child wants to spend the day curled up reading, I can't think of a better way to spend today. And have a fabulous, fabulous week. I'm going to close on this. My friend Dottie used to always say this. Why is it when our kids are inside reading a book, we think, they ought to be outside playing. It's a beautiful day. And when they're outside playing, we think, I wish she would just come in and read a book. Mothers are never satisfied. We are always looking at what's missing from their lives and missing what is happening in their lives. Don't look for what's missing. Notice what's happening, add kindling to the fire, and watch your homeschool burst into flames in a good way. Roar into an inferno of learning. Okay, then. Live honestly. Write bravely. Have a fabulous week. Sign up for Brave Writer classes, and I will see you next Monday. Bye, everybody.